Hey everybody, welcome back to Fold Space. It's good to be back. It's good to see you all here. I know it's been a little while since my last broadcast, but we are here to celebrate cicadas, one of my favorite insects for sure. And of course, this year is a historic cicada year where we have two separate cicada broods who have at this point emerged concurrently. And to start out here, I want to show you all a map of all of these different cicada broods. And of course, right now we're talking about the periodical cicada. And the periodical cicada has a lifespan of either 13 years or 17 years, which is one of the longest lifespans for any insect. I mean, you think of like the common housefly, its lifespan is anywhere from 15 to 30 days, right? So cicadas are up there in terms of the length of their lifespan. Also, funny enough, well, it's not funny at all. I think it's kind of creepy, but one of the longest lifespans of any insect is the queen termite. And queen termites can live anywhere from 50 to 100 years, which is crazy for an insect, right? But anyhow, it's so we're talking about cicadas here. Who here in the chat or say in the chat if you live in one of the current brood regions? And if you look at the map here, the light blue here in kind of Missouri and southern Illinois, but also kind of spread throughout the southeast. That is brood 14. That's one of the 13-year broods. And then we've got in the dark brown, just above that, in kind of eastern Iowa, southern Wisconsin, we've got brood 13. And now they don't overlap too much, but they do sort of butt up against one another. And I'm curious to know, because I haven't really looked into it too much about, like, in terms of like what's happening currently. Just I don't really have a sense yet of how extreme this overlap is, or if there even is much of an overlap. I had read some articles leading up to this who said, well, maybe this is a little bit overblown. It's not going to be the brood apocalypse or whatever people are calling it that people might be making it out to be. But anyhow, I think it's really cool looking at this map, because now so I just turned 41 and I'm now old enough to kind of look at this map and think back about where I was at different times in my life where I experienced the broods that emerged. I remember as a teenager, I spent my adolescent years in Nashville, Tennessee, and you see there in the light green brood covers much of Tennessee and Kentucky. And yeah, I remember that brood quite well. And then years later, not long after I graduated college here in Oberlin, Ohio, which is in northern Ohio, if you look at the dark purple section, that was the brood that emerged then, and it was quite the sight to behold, as always. And then just a few years back in 2021, when brood 10 emerged, which is the yellow, which is represented by the yellow on the map, so my family lives in Louisville, Kentucky, and I visited my family that summer. And Louisville is in Kentucky, of course, but it's right on the border of Indiana, just south of the Ohio River. And it's kind of interesting to see in the map that the yellow doesn't really extend into Kentucky. Of course, it's not meant to be an exact representation, but it was interesting that there were still quite a few cicadas in northern Kentucky that were part of that brood. So anyway, and going back to brood 14, the light green band, that's going to be emerging next year. So we have that to look forward to. Cool. Hey, Kelly, thanks for chiming in. Okay, so brood 13 has not emerged in Canada yet, in Toronto. So that's really interesting. So I mean, as many of you know, depending on where you are in terms of latitude, the southern latitudes will emerge much sooner. I know I've definitely seen a lot of pictures from friends in the southern states, like Tennessee area, where the cicadas are out. And then I know somebody in, I think, Illinois who posted some photos recently. But yeah, the last time that we had two broods emerging concurrently, I believe, was in 1803. Now, this is a fact that I gleaned off the internet. I'm not sure if that was the last time these two current broods synced up, or if it was just the last time two broods synced up at all. So that's, I'm not really sure about that. But it's still a historic year. And I just want to say hi to everyone who has chimed in the chat. Thanks for saying hello. Kathy says that they've emerged in central Illinois. And Deb mentioned that Brood 2 will be emerging in 2030, so we've got a little time before that. But yes, no, I agree. I think it is really interesting to look at this map. One thing I want to point out too that I read, so if you look at the hot pink brood in like western New York, notice it's a really tiny area. And one sort of discerning thing that I guess I won't say disturbing, but just kind of unfortunate thing I read recently was that particular brood, brood 7, is threatened by extinction. So that brood might not last much longer. Now, let me just say a little bit about the different species. Of course, again, we're talking about periodical cicadas. And I believe there are 7 different periodical cicadas that dwell in the United States. And the genus name is magic. I don't even know how to say it, but basically, if you take the word magic and cicada and you cram them together with overlapping the C, you get the name of the genus that is most common here in the United States. Okay, moving on. Hey, again, I just want to say hi to Kelly, Brent, and all right, and my friend who did the jumping frogs. Good to see you. We did jumping frogs together. Yes, that's so awesome. Okay, cool. So here we go. Here's some more. Let's delve into some more cicada facts, because the life cycle of the cicada I find very fascinating. Okay, so here we go. We see some pictures. These are some cicadas emerging from their shells. But let me go over the life cycle a little bit. Okay, so in the spring, once the soil temperature has reached 64 degrees Fahrenheit, the cicadas start to emerge. And the males emerge first, followed by the females a few days later. And so they come out of the ground and they start climbing up trees. And then a few days into their life above ground, they're developing, right? And so they have these wings that grow inside their sort of this exoskeleton, and then eventually they emerge from the shell. And I remember as a kid finding these little shells like stuck on trees all the time. I'm sure a lot of you who live in the United States can relate to that experience. I always thought it was the coolest thing because these shells are just so interesting and intricate. And they've got these like cool little sort of like claws that help them climb up the bark of the tree. Okay, so but once they emerge from their shell, it takes about 30 minutes before the cicada can pump enough blood into its wings so that it can then use them to fly. And so that's when the cicadas are most vulnerable, is during that sort of 30-minute period after they emerge from their shell. They're pumping blood in their bodies, they're bringing some color into their bodies, and but then once they get enough blood pumping through their wings, then they can start to fly around. Okay, And of course, one thing cicadas are known for are their deafening sound. And of course, the sound is used for mating. Okay, so they're flying around, they're mating, they're having a good time, and then they eventually, the females start to climb up the trees, and they usually, I think they climb pretty high up into the canopy of the tree, and once the female's ready, then it starts to lay its eggs. And a single female can lay anywhere from 400 to 600 eggs. Okay, so, and by the way, it's estimated that any single brood will contain billions of cicadas. Billions. It's just like crazy. I mean, cicadas truly are strategists in terms of biology. They rely on strength in numbers to increase their chances of survival. And of course, when these billions of cicadas do emerge during their particular period, this is like a feeding frenzy for birds and other animals alike. So yes, the cicadas certainly are edible. They are a proteinaceous snack. I've never tried one before. Not sure if I will anytime soon. but it's a definitely quite the boon for lots of other species, because the cicadas, they don't really have many defense mechanisms, if any at all. They don't get scared away by large animals, including humans. So again, strength in numbers. Enough of them are flying around that some of them are going to get through. They're going to lay their eggs. Okay. So then I'm not sure how long it takes for the eggs to hatch, but then the eggs do eventually hatch. And by the way, I'm just going to change slides here. Here's of course the adult cicada. And this is a picture that I took back in 2021 during Brood 10 when I was visiting my family in Louisville, Kentucky. And so once the eggs hatch, this is really interesting. That's something I kind of just learned recently, is that so the new nymphs that have hatched from the eggs, and actually, so I did read that it takes about 6 weeks for the eggs to hatch. But the new nymphs that then emerge from the eggs, then they start to chew through the limbs of like whatever branch that they're on, right? And I've always noticed during cicada seasons, like when broods emerge, that you'll look around at treetops and you'll see these little tiny patches of dead leaves, like in these green trees, right? And you can spot where the cicadas have laid their eggs, because that's where the nymphs have chewed through the branch. But what's so cool about this is that is how the cicadas make their way back down to the ground. By chewing through these little branches, they fall to the ground, and once they hit the ground, then the nymphs can burrow underground, and they burrow about a foot underneath the soil, and then start hanging out for the next 13 or 17 years while they develop. It takes them that long to develop to the point where then they're ready to emerge. So fascinating. Really cool stuff. Another fun fact about the sound of the cicada. It's a very loud sound, especially, and you know this if you've ever experienced this, and particularly when a brood has emerged and you can hear the cacophony of sound. It is such an amazing experience to hear all of the cicadas at once. And yes, it is really loud, but they are so loud that the sound itself from a single cicada can reach 120 decibels. 120 decibels. And just for comparison, that is about as loud as a chainsaw. And it's also louder than live rock music. So that's pretty wild. And when we're talking about cicadas worldwide, there are actually over 3,000 species of cicadas. So they exist on every single continent of the world, with the exception, of course, of Antarctica, right? And yeah, so those are my fun facts about cicadas in general. And so today we are going to fold 3 different cicada models. And I've been planning this for months and months and months. I've been like so excited about delving into the world of origami cicadas because there are quite a few origami cicadas out there in the world and in the world of origami. And so today we're going to start out with in this 2-part series with folding 3 different cicada models, right? And I thought it would be important for us to start out with the traditional Japanese cicada, which is certainly the easiest of the bunch. Okay, and then from there we will move on to this clever little design by origami master Kunihiko Kasahara. And then finally we'll round things out with this really nice pureland origami model that was designed by Sy Chen. And I do want to note that I did receive permission from Sy and indirectly through Kunihiko Kasahara to teach these models. As I found out when seeking permission to teach Kasahara-san's model, is that he's actually okay with people teaching any of his published models as long as you give him credit. So that was a nice thing to find out because there's lots of cool Kunihiko Kasahara models out there that I'd love to teach you at some point. But we're going to start out with the OG, the traditional Japanese cicada. Now, of course, it makes sense that the Japanese have a traditional cicada model because cicadas are quite relevant to the country of Japan and Japanese culture. Okay, so I'll start by saying there are actually about 30 different cicada species in Japan. I don't believe, I might be totally wrong about this, but I don't believe they have periodical cicadas in Japan like we do here in North America. I think that might be kind of unique to this continent. But they have the annual cicada. Of course, annual cicadas, they emerge every single year, right? And so in Japan, they've got quite a few 30 cicada species. You can find 5 different cicada species in Tokyo alone, right? And I want to share a little story. Back in 2014, almost 10 years ago exactly, in August of 2014, I had the privilege of going to Japan to attend a couple of different origami events. And those events, it was the OSMI conference and the Tantedan convention, which they held within a week of one another, just so they could, kind of coincide in that way. And the event took place at the University of Tokyo. And in the classrooms at the University of Tokyo, I mean, it's a pretty old building and they don't have air conditioning in the classrooms. And so the windows would always be open in the different classrooms where we were attending the different presentations and classes. And so here it is, August, middle of summer, you would just constantly hear this buzz of cicadas. And in Japanese culture, the cicadas are very much a symbol of summer. And I think a lot of Japanese folks, they feel that summer hasn't truly begun until you hear the cicadas, right? And I certainly believe that. Another thing I'll mention too, the cicadas in Japan are huge compared to the periodical ones that we have here in the United States. I mean, I would say they're at least twice as big. I mean, they're gigantic. So that, I just, again, makes a lot of sense that the Japanese embrace the cicadas. You find a lot of cicadas in Japanese anime, or also a lot of video games from Japan. Cicadas often play a role in some capacity, okay? So another thing too that I'll mention is that the cicada is a symbol of rebirth. And of course there's a lot of Buddhist influence in Japanese culture, and a major tenet of Buddhism is the idea of rebirth. And so the cicadas very much symbolize that. All right, so I'm sure many of you have folded the traditional Japanese cicada. And so, but we're going to do it anyways because I think it's important to include it. Plus, what you'll find in some of these different models that we fold throughout this cicada series, you will find a lot of overlap. At least I have found some different connections between the different versions. Okay, so starting out here with our traditional cicada, we're going to begin with if you're using kami, and now you can use pretty much any kind of paper for this model. I'm using kami, and I'm going to start with the white side facing up so I get this stripe, sort of V-shaped stripe on the back. And you begin by folding in half, bottom corner to top corner. All right. And then from here, we're going to take each of the opposite side corners of the triangle and match them up to the top point of the triangle. And so I'll bring one up. And then another. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have used black paper for this, but it's okay. I've got some different color here that I'll use for the next one. Okay, so, but this one's easy enough that we don't need to see a ton of detail. So we've brought the corners up to the top. Now we're going to bring those same corners down and off to the side a little bit. And I'm going to make the crease connect with this outside corner. But you've got a lot of wiggle room here. There isn't an exact placement for this step. This is one that we might refer to as a rat fold, where rat stands for right about there. And so we'll take this corner, bring it down. I am still going to try to make sure I connect with this corner. But notice that this will stick out off to the side just a little bit. Okay, so then we'll do the other wing, same way. All right, there we go. And now up here at the top, we've got two layers. Okay, we're going to take the topmost layer from the top corner, and we're going to make another rat fold right about there. And this time we're going to bring this down right about there. Okay, so there's no exact placement for this again, but we will make a crease that relative to these corners is right about there. All right, cool. So then we'll do, once again, the next corner, or the other corner at the top, we're going to fold it down as well, but we're not going to go quite as far as we did before. And this is what's going to create the stripe for the color change. So again, you just fold to taste, centering that point. Okay. Finally, we're going to take the model and flip it like a pancake front to back. And now we don't have a line in the middle here. And eventually, I mean, you could put this crease in the center to begin with when you begin the model. It's not really crucial, but at this point, I do want you to kind of imagine a crease line, or at least a line of symmetry that runs down the middle. And so what you're going to do is for each of these slanting edges and we have to fold through a whole bunch of layers here, but you want to bring this slanting edge to the middle. And there's a bunch of layers that you have to fold through. And it's not crucial that it hits the middle exactly, but you can think of kind of folding this flap over so that this edge becomes more vertical. So it becomes kind of more sort of perpendicular to like the horizontal at the bottom. Okay, and of course we do the same thing on the opposite side, bringing it to the same place, folding through all of those layers. It's helpful to do this on the table to get through all those layers, and just do the best you can to flatten that out. Okay. Now there's some variability that you can work with here as far as how far in or what angle you fold those two flaps. So just, you know, experiment, see what you like. And then if you flip it over, there is our traditional Japanese cicada. And in this way, it's kind of flat in this sort of configuration, but you can, if you want, you can add that central mountain crease now, if you'd like. Of course, you could have already added it in the beginning, but I don't add it, I don't feel the need to, because I know that I can always add it here at the end. And what you could do is kind of mount and fold through the middle here. And that gives the cicada a little bit more volume. And one thing that I did here, which you'll see this come up again in another version when we do the Kawahata cicada on Thursday. One thing that I've been doing a lot lately is, now in this case I've actually got a paper clip holding this closed. You can take a little paper clip and let me see if I got one here. Yeah. So, you know, you could just, if you wanted to keep it this way so it's got a little bit more volume, it also makes the bottom edge more flat so it sits on the table a little bit nicer. Notice how this one is kind of like off to the side because this one is not attached in any way. But you can either use a paper clip to clip those layers together, and you could clip it from the top or the bottom, doesn't really matter. Or if you want, you could get some glue out. You know, there's nothing wrong with getting a little bit of glue. You just put a little bead of glue on one of these edges here, and then kind of overlap and let it set. Okay. So there you have it, the traditional Japanese cicada. Now, there's one model that I want to show you all that I'm not actually going to teach you because there's a video for it already on YouTube. And what I'll do is after the broadcast, I'll drop the link down in the chat below. But it's actually pretty easy to find. If you go on YouTube, just search for origami cicada, you'll find this model, which by an account I believe is called Shinzaburu. I might be saying that wrong, but this was a video that was posted, I think about 12 years ago, thereabouts. The channel does not seem to be active, and it doesn't seem like it's been active for quite some time, but there's a simple little 5-minute video, and they basically, they don't claim authorship over this. They call this another traditional model, but it has a lot of the same sort of principles or just kind of basic structure that you use here in the traditional Japanese model. But what's cool about this is that you can do a little bit of extra shaping here and a little bit of shaping up here, and then you get these little sort of nodules that represent the eyes of the cicada, which is really nice. I don't have one here with me, but I've also been folding these out of just straight black paper that doesn't have the color change. It's just black on both sides. And I think they look pretty nice with that. I mean, I think the color change here looks pretty neat, but at the same time, you know, I kind of like the all black ones too. So yeah, so again, easy to find. I'll drop the link later once the broadcast ends, but if you just search for origami cicada, you can find this one, okay? And you'll see how it is very similar to what we just did. All right, so we're moving right along here. Kelly asked, can you tuck it into the pocket? Now, you kind of can, but it doesn't, yeah, actually you totally can. You can absolutely tuck that one flap into the pocket here on the other side. So yeah, so you don't even have to use glue if you don't want. If you're a purist, nothing wrong with that. Me personally, I've got no issue. Now, it's funny you mentioned that. When we do Sy Chen's pureland cicada, I actually do the same thing already. I tuck the two ends together. So yeah, you'll see that coming back here in a bit. All right, so moving on to the esteemed Kunihiko Kasahara cicada. And this is found, instructions for this can be found in the classic Kasahara title, Origami Omnibus, which was originally published in 1988. So this book has been around for a while, and if you don't have this on your bookshelf, if you're a origami enthusiast, you have to pick this one up. It's amazing. It's like almost 400 pages. And it's just really, I mean, it's just full of all sorts of different types of origami too. You've got your figurative stuff, your representational origami, but he also does a ton of geometric models, modular, one sheet, models folded out of different polygons other than squares. So this is a must-have. I highly recommend this title. So here we go. Okay, I won't use black for this one, but I'm still going to use kami. I'm going to use 7-inch kami here. And Brent makes a good point. Yes, you can actually also fold the corners back for the eyes on this one, much like we'll do on the next model we're about to fold. And all right, cool. So now this, one reason I really like this model is it's rather different in its whole approach to its like basic structure. And we're going to begin this model essentially by making 3 Blintz folds. And if you know anything about origami and you know about Blintz folds, you know that the paper can get really thick really fast. So you probably don't want to use paper that's very thick to begin with. These that I folded here, I folded from Duo Kami, which has a different color, you know, inked onto each side of the paper. So that actually makes the paper kind of thick. But still, I mean, it's doable. You can get away with it for sure, but you probably don't want to go much thicker than that. All right. So here we go. Let's start out. Now I'm going to begin with the white side facing up. Now in this case, the white side will be the wing color and eventually the eyes. This model has a very clever way of getting the color change for the wings. Another reason I like this. So let's start out by folding the diagonals of the square. So let's take the bottom corner, match it up to the top corner to create our first diagonal. And then we'll open it up like so. Now that first crease that we just folded is running vertically, so that we can now fold the second diagonal of the square, or rhombus, or diamond. Okay, then we open it up once again. Okay, so we now have our 2 diagonals folded, and we have a reference point. We've got the center where those 2 creases intersect. So we'll use that center point to create our first of 3 Blintz folds. Okay, so let's start out by taking the bottom corner and bring that point right up to that intersection without crossing it. We just want to come right up to it and make our first fold. And if you've taken any classes with me and if you've done Blintz folds with me before, you know that I like to fold the second corner, or excuse me, I like to fold the opposite corner as the second corner. And for those who don't know what a Blintz fold is where we are folding all 4 corners of the square to the center. But you can do it in a couple of different orders. My preferred order is to do the opposite corners first, at least in this case. Like when we're starting out with the fresh square, it's your first Blintz. There are some exceptions where I might do it a different way, but here we'll go ahead and do those opposite corners first, and then we'll do the other 2 corners. I'm going to rotate, take this bottom corner and fold it up. The nice thing about having those 2 flaps folded first is that now this third one, you can kind of just position it right in between the first 2, and it helps ensure that you don't overlap too much with the previous flaps that you've already folded, because you don't want to overlap at all. You want everything to just come right up next to each other for each of these flaps. Okay, so then we rotate it, because I always like to fold up and away from myself. We'll take that bottom corner and bring it up to the center. And there is our first blintz fold. All right, now we're not going to do a, for the second blintz, we're not just going to fold them all to the same side. Here's what I mean. So I have taken my blintz fold and I've rotated it so that the corners are now oriented at north, east, south, and west. And I'm going to just start with the southern corner, the bottom corner, and I'm going to fold that to the middle. And notice that I kind of hold those other two flaps steady while I fold this next corner. And you can use the crease lines now as your guide. And it's okay if, often I find myself folding just like a hair shy of those crease lines. You'll find that often it works a little better to not go right to the crease line and maybe give yourself the tiniest bit of room. Just to give all of the different flaps room, because all the paper is going to start competing for space here. All right, so we've just folded one corner to the middle. Now before we do the other three corners, we're going to take the whole model and we're going to flip it over front to back. So we're going to flip it like a pancake before we fold the other three corners. So I'm going to rotate it like so, and because I like to fold up and away from myself, I'll take this bottom corner and fold that one up first, and it's the one that's in the middle of the other two. Again, I'm leaving just like the tiniest little hair space between the edges of this flap and the creases. And then now I'll do the other two. There's one. And then now the other one, our fourth corner. So we've got three on this relative side of the model. Okay. So that was our second blintz fold. Now we need to make a third. Wow, the paper is getting really thick. We're going to start experiencing a lot of paper creep. Brent, I like your joke. Yes, paper creeping up the tree. You got it. Yes, we are creeping here, just like cicadas. And we're going to take the model first and flip it back over. So we're on the other side again where we only folded one of those corners for the second blintz. But now we will do an entire blintz on this side of the model. So you can start anywhere, but I'm going to take that one corner, and again, I'm holding the paper down on the table to help keep the layers from shifting around too much. Take that bottom corner, fold it up, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and go to the opposite corner second. Doesn't matter where you start because we're doing them all anyway, but I am going to do the opposite corners relative to one another first, okay? And then I'll do those last two, and yes, boy oh boy, that paper is getting thick. Lots of layers. But again, I'll mention that just by like folding this third corner so that it's in between the first two, you can use those first two flaps to make sure your third one isn't overlapping. And then same with the fourth one. That's a lot of layers. Okay, and don't worry, there's little gaps. If everything isn't like right up next to each other, it's okay. And you can adjust as needed. All right, now we're going to take the model after the third blintz and we're going to flip it over again. Flip it back to the other side. And now notice that there are 3 quadrants here that are similar and then one that is different. And notice, these quadrants, they've got these little slits in between. And I've got it oriented so that I've got slits at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. But we only need to worry about the slit here at 12 o'clock. And what we're going to do is create kind of a double squash fold. And it might help to kind of like, get into these pockets a little bit just to kind of get the paper kind of used to like kind of buckling out like that. But what we're going to do, we're going to take the edges down here and we're going to kind of push up. This is like a neat little double squash fold. And this, what's going to happen is this point here will meet at the top. So I'm going to do that double squash, and I'm going to push that up, and it creates a rectangle. And there is a like a traditional lantern origami model that is created, and part of it is created in the same way. Basically, you would have had the same thing at the bottom, and you would do the same thing at the bottom. So just in case that seems familiar to you, that might be where you recognize it. And yes, Steve, you're right. It does shrink down quite a lot with those 3 Blintz folds. Now, we're still looking at the same side as where we did this squash, okay? But now we need to let the model open up a bit. Now, I'm going to open up part of this by, I'm not going to actually flip it over, but we've got these Blintz flaps underneath here. So still looking at the same side as where I did the squash, I'm going to kind of let those bottom 2, you see how I unfolded those from behind? I'm going to let those bottom 2 flaps open up. I'm also going to let the top flaps open up because what I want to do here ultimately, these points that are meeting here in the middle on the right and left, you want to just go ahead and let that open all the way up. So notice here, I've basically opened up like half of that previous Blintz fold. Well, actually, I take that back. I just opened up the entirety of the 3rd and final Blintz fold and then half of the one just before it. But the reason we're opening it up is that we want to take these points. You see where I'm pointing here and here? If you get underneath those and kind of pop them up a little bit, okay, then notice I've got this rhombus shape happening here that has mountain folds that kind of shape the perimeter. And then what I'll do here with the paper sticking out to the side, I'm going to accentuate the mountain folds that come from these 2 corners out to the outside corners and kind of squeeze those. And then this will then collapse. But what I'm going to do, notice I'm going to take the whole model, I'm going to flip it back over to the other side because these sort of new wing flaps that we've created, they're going to collapse down like this. But notice how it's not quite hitting where I want it to here. So if I flip it over here, that can help me, find those corners. And then this flap will sit down flat like so. All right, now we've got some wing flaps. And because the model has shrunk down considerably, I'm going to go in and zoom in as far as I can here. Okay, so now I'm just going to kind of peek, we're just going to peek on the other side real quick. Now we've kind of got the basic structure for the insect. We've got wings, we've got an area for the head, but we're going to be looking at this side here for this next step. And as my good friend Bernie Payton would say, now the real fun begins, which is another way of saying we're about to do something that's a little weird, maybe a little uncomfortable, but you'll be fine. Trust me, it's okay. So what we're going to do is create the color change. So what that means is that for these wing flaps, we have to turn the paper inside out. All right. Now, there's a couple of different ways of doing this step. The first approach, the first way I'm going to show you is the way I recommend you start out doing this, but we're basically going to be making a closed sink. And don't get nervous. I know years ago when I first got into origami, closed sinks used to really, make me break out into a sweat because they're kind of tricky until you get the hang of them. Once you get the hang of them, they're fine. But the thing about a closed sink is that the paper isn't going to be happy for a second. It's going to be kind of, it's going to get a little crumpled up. It's not going to want to go the way you're wanting it to go. But trust me, we can make it go, and then it'll be fine. All right, so here's what we're going to do. So if you look here at one wing flap, and I'll tell you about the other way to do it here after we do the first one. If you kind of get underneath this flap and kind of open it up a little bit. Now, the other thing we want to do too, we actually want to look inside this pocket. Now, do you see this raw corner right here? And by raw corner, I mean like the actual corner of the piece of paper that we started with. We're going to take this part and we're going to pull this out. Okay, so I've taken in the raw corner, I pulled this out a bit. And now I have this point sticking up here, right? Okay, so what we want to do is we want to take this point here and we want to sink it. And the reason this is a closed sink is because we've got this extra layer sitting on top of it. In an open sink, we can kind of open up all the layers all the way and just reverse creases and then let it sink, and it's much easier. But for a closed sink, we got to kind of treat it as if it's one single layer, but we can't unfold it. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this point, we're going to sink it in. The other thing that happens is that we've got this sort of like teardrop shape, and basically for most of this teardrop shape, at least on these edges here, we're going to have mountain creases. But let's just see what that looks like. Now again, the paper isn't going to be happy for just a few seconds here, but we want to make sure all these layers stay together, okay? But you just kind of have to go for it. So I'm going to go for it. I'm going to take that point and I'm going to push it in. And notice the paper's like, oh no. So you just have to keep going. But push it in a little farther. And once you kind of push it down all the way, now instead of sticking up, now that point is sunk in like this little pocket. Before we collapse it down all the way, the other thing we want to do too, this loose flap, we're going to return it to where it was before. So the point kind of goes back down into the pocket. But once we're there, we can kind of take the rest of the model and flatten it down, and there is our color change for the wing. We've taken the flap and we've turned it inside out on itself. There's a traditional canoe, like a boat model, where you kind of have to do the same thing, where you just kind of, you got to take the whole thing and just like turn it inside out. The paper gets wrinkly. It doesn't like what's going on until you finish the step. And don't be concerned. I mean, your paper might be kind of wrinkly here. The point might not have gone, perfectly, out in the opposite direction. That's okay. This is actually the backside of the finished model, and you're not even going to see this part of the paper anyhow. All right, cool. All right, nice, Kelly. Looks good. So for the other wing, we could go about turning it inside out the same way as we did before, but it is actually possible to unfold the model, open it up a bit more to get your creases to kind of reverse. However, I'm not going to demonstrate that here, but if you want to do it the other way, what I recommend is just to start out, at least in your first few tries, fold a few of these, and do the one as the closed sink, but then when you do the other side, you can kind of open it up and just you'll have a better sense of what creases need to be where, okay? But I mean, you really got to open this up, and I don't want to confuse people or try to explain it that way. But if you want to try to figure it out for yourself, it's entirely possible, and it's actually not too difficult. Again, once you know what it's supposed to look like and where those creases are, and what I meant to mention is that you have this nice parallelogram shape here. So you can recreate that by opening it up. If you want to be brave, you just have to be able to get it back to where you had it, right? But totally doable. But like I said, I'm going to do it the same way as I did before. So just to demonstrate once again, you open that pocket, but you got to find the raw corner of the paper and pull that out. Let that flap come free. And actually, as I pull it out, I kind of have to get underneath it so I get this sort of doming effect here. And this is the point that I'm going to sink. So here we go. We're going to take that point, and I'm just going to kind of push it all the way in. And I think this is a great opportunity to practice closed sinks. Because, you know, you just kind of have to go for it. You just have to kind of, you know, push it in while keeping all those layers together. But once you get the hang of it, they're surprisingly doable. Okay, so I've sunk the point, that loose flap. I'm going to go ahead and tuck that back into the pocket, and then let it flatten out. And there we have the color change for the wings. Clever. Okay, we're almost finished. All we got to do now is flip the model back over to the other side. And we're going to fold these corners in to make the wing. And these are judgment folds or rat folds. And but the landmark that you can use, or one of the landmarks anyways, is this corner here, okay? And you're going to take this and you're going to fold that over. And so you see, as you fold that over, the other thing that I kind of look for that you can use as a reference point, in fact, actually you can, this doesn't have to be a rat fold, believe it or not. You can make this point land on the crease that we have right here. So again, we're connecting with that corner there, fold that over, and if you want, I mean, you actually, there's a few places that it can land. It doesn't have to be exact. Now, I will say it does not go all the way to the middle line, but however far over you fold it should be fine. And of course, just try to fold the other one about the same distance, same position. Thank you, Teresa. I'm glad you liked my explanation of the closed sinks. Like I said, I used to be intimidated by them, but once you kind of get the hang of it and you have a sense of what's supposed to happen, then they're not so bad, but you just have to kind of go for it. All right, so for the eyes, now in the book, in Kasahara-san's book, at this point, he just has you take the corners and fold them down to make the eyes. And I think in the book he even has them, like, I think he folds them a little bit and then kind of has them sticking out a little bit more or whatever. So yeah, so you can do it that way, all right? And that gives you the eyes. But I was playing around and I thought, you know, it'd be cool to get the color change in the eyes also. So I'll give you a second. Can you all figure out how I do that? Here's what I do. If you flip it over on the back, before folding the eyes, see the eyes come from these corners here and here, right? But we can change the color of those corners by taking this point here and folding it down. Or in other words, we're bisecting the right angle, essentially a right angle, here at the corner. So we take this one flap, fold it down so that the edges align here on the side. Now that corner is white. Ta-da! I'll go ahead and do the other one. Bring that top horizontal edge over to the vertical edge on the side. And there you go. So then now when you flip it back over, and you can fold these corners down, and now the eyes have changed color. So pretty easy trick to getting color change for the eyes. And I will say that in a lot of Kasahara-san's teaching in his books, he is quite often encouraging the folder, the reader, you, to experiment and come up with your own variations on the models he shows you. In fact, there are some models in his books where he doesn't actually even show you how to fold it. And I think he's just kind of implying that, like, well, here's a little bit of information, you figure it out. So I love a lot of Kasahara's work for that reason. He's very open to play and experimentation and just discovering stuff for yourself, which I managed to do with the color change for the eyes. All right, cool. So speaking of color changes for the eyes, our final model today is this cute little cicada designed by Sy Chen. And Sy Chen actually designed this model in honor of Brood 10, which I think I might have already mentioned, which emerged back in 2021. Okay, and to celebrate the emergence of Brood 10, he designed this pureland origami model and published diagrams on the Origami USA website, which are actually free. Now, I highly encourage you all to become members of Origami USA if you're not already, but you don't have to be a member to access these free diagrams for the pureland cicada. And for those who don't know, a pureland origami model is one that only uses mountain and valley folds. So there are no crease reversals, there are no inside reverse folds, there are no sinks, certainly. There aren't any squashes. It's just purely mountains and valleys, okay, just straight up. And there's actually a lot that you can do with just mountains and valleys. And I will mention that Mark Kirschenbaum has a book of models that were entirely designed in the pureland style. And they're pretty sophisticated. I mean, like, you kind of, I think he challenged this notion that pureland origami models were relatively simple because it's just mountains and valleys and you're not doing any of that other fancy stuff. But I think he demonstrated in his book on pureland origami models. I don't remember the title right off the top of my head, but there's actually quite a lot that you can do with just the pureland approach. So I highly recommend you check that out. Alrighty, so now here we go, Sy Chen. So yeah, I will use that same color that I just used before. I felt that that showed up pretty well on the camera. And so if you're using a sheet with two colors, let me zoom out a little bit here. And of course, like, if you're using red and black duo, excellent use of the color change here for the eyes. So what you want to do is start out with whatever color, because hopefully you're using paper that has a different color on each side, is that you want to start with the eye color facing up. Okay, so that color will mostly be hidden throughout the model until the very end when you kind of reveal it for the eyes. Okay, so in this case, you know, I want to fold a brown cicada that has white eyes. Okay, so I will start with the white side facing up. And so I'll start out by taking the bottom corner and I'm going to fold it up to the top. And you will see in folding this that this is very much related to the traditional Japanese cicada. We just spice it up a little bit and then create the color change, obviously, for the eyes. Okay. So just like with the traditional cicada model, we then take these two side corners and fold them up to the tip top. And from here, once again, we're going to do the same thing we do for the traditional model, where we take these corners and we fold them down so that they stick out to the side a little bit. And I'm making sure to connect with this outside corner. So bring that point down and off to the side just a little bit. And same on the opposite side. Thank you, Kelly, and you're welcome too. Happy to teach, always. All right, so looking pretty similar. Now we're going to deviate just a little bit. And what we're going to do, we're going to take these corners here and here, and we're going to fold them underneath a little ways. So one way you could think about this is if you visualize, I don't have my pointer pencil handy. Yeah, it's way over there. I'm not going to be able to get it. It's okay, I'll point with my finger. So if you take this edge on one side, and of course we'll do the same exact thing on the opposite side, and just kind of imagine dividing this into fourths. So if you kind of imagine divide it in half and then divide that half by half. Here, that is your rough landmark. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but this is just an approximation. But if you just kind of visualize that one quarter of this length this way, we'll take that corner and we'll fold it behind, like so, okay? And we'll do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm just going to try to match, because you don't really have a landmark underneath either, and it's like it's whatever you want. It doesn't have to be exact. But you know, my thinking is that however far I did it on one side, I'm just going to try to match that on the opposite side, because we do like symmetry in origami, right? So like I'm looking here, this one's going a little farther over, so I'll adjust it a little bit. I'll kind of pull it up a little ways. And that looks pretty good. And yeah, I like that. That's close enough. All right. So there's that. Now we are going to create a pinch mark to use as a landmark. And the landmark we want to create is a pinch mark on the edge of this side here, from this point to this point. Okay. So it's a little awkward to do this because we've already got all of this stuff going on here. All the layers are built up here. But if you can do this from either side. It doesn't really matter whichever feels more comfortable to you. I think I'm going to go for it on this side and just bring this point over to this point. Of course, we're not making a crease. We're just going to pinch along the edge so that we can identify the center or the midpoint of this edge. Okay, so if I bring those two corners together, and you know, it doesn't have to be flat down here, obviously, because we're not folding through all that. But if you match up the corners, give yourself your little pinch here, and then open it up, there's our landmark. All right, so now this is a useful landmark because what we're going to do is we're going to create, well, first of all, we're going to fold this top layer down, but we're going to fold this down as far as it wants to go, or in other words, the crease that we create will connect these two corners. Okay, so I bring that down. Essentially what I'm doing is taking this top point of that one top layer and I'm bringing it down to the bottom point. But it's okay if it doesn't reach all the way, because really what we're looking for, and it probably won't, we're looking for the connecting crease on those corners. Okay. Oh, and you know what? I screwed up. Actually, we're taking both corners down. I didn't screw up. I just left that out. I forgot that we're actually doing both layers. Okay. Now this is where we use the landmark, the pinch mark that we just made. Because what we're going to do is we're going to bring this point back up, okay? But when we bring it up, we want to bring it up so that this pinch mark that I'm pointing to, you might not be able to really see it on camera, you want the pinch mark to overlap with this edge. So you bring both layers back up, and we want to kind of, make sure it stays centered as we can, but there it is. That pinch mark is now connecting with that horizontal edge. And there we go. Zoom in a little bit. Here we go. Okay, now we're going to start creating the color change for the eyes. And so to start, we're going to take just one single layer, and we're going to bring that point down to meet this creased edge that we just created. Again, trying to keep it centered. We don't have a center line at this point. We could have added it in the beginning if you wanted it, but it's not necessary. All right, so then once we've done that, we're going to take that same point and we're going to fold it back up towards the top point, but we're not going to fold it all the way. And however far up we fold it determines the size of the eyes. Okay, so if you look here, you can kind of start to see the eyes forming here and here. Okay, so just kind of bring that up. It's a judgment fold, however far you want, how far down you want. Okay. And then what we'll do is bring this point back down, and now we're folding through both of these layers here. And this fold here will kind of finish like the shape of the eye. So you see how that works? So how far down you fold it? Well, what I like to do, or actually what the instructions tell you to do, is if you look at that horizontal edge underneath, like right, which would kind of, it mirrors the outside corner on this side. If you use that as your landmark, that gives you a nice little rhombus, and of course you want it to try to land about there on each side. But it doesn't have to be exact. You're just kind of folding it down enough so that you get your little eyes. And finally, you'll take this point and you'll tuck it underneath. And this is a little tricky, I think, because, well, you just have to kind of hold the layers together. It's not too bad. But yeah, but you're just kind of tucking that point underneath. Okay, and now we've got eyes. And finally, we're going to kind of create the overall shape of the cicada much in the same way that we did before. However, this time it looks a little different. But you can use these corners as your landmark, the corners of the eyes. Okay, so if you want to look at it from this angle, where you're going to mount and fold the flap behind, that's basically what you're doing. You're just mount and folding that behind into whatever shape you want for sort of the rest of the body and the wing. So you can kind of change that angle a bit. You can make it a little bit more vertical. You can keep it kind of slanted. It's really up to you. And I'm going to go mostly vertical, slightly slanted, because that's what the instructions recommend. So there's that. And then if you were to flip it over, you see that this point overlaps the center line. Okay, so that's why I just went ahead and I did the fold from this side so that I can be looking at the finished result. It's kind of like you're drawing with mountain folds. It's like, I love doing this, where you just kind of envision the shape that you want, and wherever you want that edge to be, that's where your fold's going to be. So it's almost like drawing a line with the pen or pencil, but we're using a crease instead. Or you could think of it like we're we're cutting this part off, but no, we're not cutting it. We're hiding it underneath. And there you have it. And similar to what Kelly suggested earlier on during the stream, with the first model, she asked, well, can you tuck these flaps? And I find that it actually, for both of these, I did just that. I tucked those corners into the pocket. Now they'll fit kind of differently depending on what proportions you use or like the angles for that last fold. Another thing that you might want to do at this point is, now it doesn't need like a hard mountain crease, but you might want to give it kind of a soft mountain crease down the center. So, I'm not going to go super hard, but I'm just going to give it just like this slight little fold. You got a lot more layers at the top, so it's a little trickier up there. But that gives it a little bit more dimension. Now these two, I really didn't put any center crease in at all. But I did certainly tuck one corner into the opposite corner, or opposite pocket, okay? And it stays surprisingly well, believe it or not. So there you go. The pureland cicada. Cool, yeah. I agree. It is an interesting take on the cicada fold. And that comes back to why I wanted to kind of show you all these different versions of a cicada, because it's neat seeing different people's interpretation. Now, of course, there are some super elaborate, more hyper-complex origami cicadas out there. Cicadas that look quite lifelike. And we're going to take a look at some of those in the next stream on Thursday. But it's pretty incredible what people have done out there. Robert Lang in particular, someone we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk a little bit about his design process of finding the perfect cicada. We're also going to talk a bit about Yoshizawa in that regard. And I am so excited to share with you Thursday's model, this clever little design by Fumiaki Kawahata. And wow, I am in love with this model. This is like one of my new favorite origami models. It checks a lot of boxes for me in terms of like what makes a really great origami model, which include, but is not limited to, the ease of folding, clever design, and the end result. And even though, this is certainly the most, relative to the group of 4 cicadas that I'm showing you during this series, this is certainly the most complex. It is by no means a complex model. But it gives us lots of really fun details, like the sort of pleating in the abdomen. It's got really great eyes. And you even get some fun crease lines that just kind of look nice on the body, I think. And you will see, as I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek, it has a lot of similarities still, or at least some similarities, to the overall structure of the traditional cicada model. So I love that it's kind of a callback to that. But yeah, I love folding this model. This is one of those origami models that I like to say folds itself. Okay, of course it's not actually self-folding, but what that means is that as you're folding, everything just kind of falls into place quite nicely, and it just makes for a very fun and enjoyable folding experience. So that's going to be on Thursday, same time, same channel, and like I said, we'll look at some other origami cicadas, and who knows what else might happen. But oh, cool. Deb mentioned in the comments, Pureland Designs, Creative Origami Kit, Learn to Fold Like a Pro by Mark Kirschenbaum. And yeah, Deb was able to borrow that as an ebook from the Brooklyn Public Library. Very cool. Cool, good. glad that you like that last model, Stephen. Kelly likes the choice of models too. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, what brood number should we call our fold today? I don't know. Should we call it brood 28 because it's the 28th of May? I don't know. Sure, why not? All right, Brent, always good to see you as always. You too, Rebecca. And I'm sorry if I've missed anybody in the chat. Oh, Rinky, hello, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And Sister Mercy wasn't able to watch the whole thing, but you can always go back and watch this later. The recording will be up indefinitely on the YouTube channel here. And all right, well, I think that's about it. I'm gonna sign off here. And thank you all so much for joining me today. It's always so much fun to teach and share origami with you. I also love delving into the fun facts. I had a really fun time researching cicadas and learning all about this mysterious and fascinating insect. So cool. You are welcome, Joanne. Thank you too. And yeah, okay, yeah, so today's brood is brood 28. I don't know if that's a brood on the map. Here, let's just check that out real quick. Does it go up to 28? No. It looks like it gets up to 23. Another thing I'll mention too, you know, I was talking about how like the one brood 7, the hot pink area up in Western New York is on the brink of extinction. There are actually a handful of other broods that have already gone extinct here in the United States. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that that species went extinct, but whatever, you know, that periodical rhythm that they were a part of just isn't happening anymore. They've also shown recently that there are some broods, like from like a 17-year brood, emerged 4 years early with a different 13-year brood. So things are getting a little out of whack here, but you know, I have faith in the cicadas. There are literally billions, if not trillions, of periodical cicadas burrowed in the ground at really any given time here in North America. So hopefully they'll be okay, but still reason to, you know, keep them in our thoughts. But okie dokie. We'll see you on Thursday for the Fumiaki Kawahata cicada. And until then, ta-ta.